People rarely admit that the hardest part isn't always being rejected. It's waiting. Waiting while your phone stays silent. Waiting while you convince yourself they're probably just busy. Waiting while your mind quietly starts writing stories your heart never asked for. Because a text that never comes isn't just an unanswered message. For many people, it becomes an unanswered question about themselves. You don't just wonder why they haven't replied. You wonder what changed, what you missed, what you said wrong, whether you suddenly became less interesting overnight. And that's what makes silence so psychologically powerful. Silence leaves room for imagination. And imagination almost never stays neutral. It usually drifts toward fear. For some people, that fear is small. For others, it reaches much deeper than the conversation itself. Because sometimes the waiting isn't only about one person. It's about every moment in life when affection became unpredictable. When attention appeared without warning. When warmth disappeared without explanation. The phone becomes a screen, but emotionally, it starts feeling like a mirror, showing every insecurity you've tried not to look at. The strange thing is that modern relationships have made this experience almost ordinary. A century ago, waiting for communication meant days. Today, it means minutes. Technology made connection instant. It also made absence impossible to ignore. You can see when someone was active. You notice when they post another story. You watch their follower count change. You realize they responded to someone else. The silence is no longer empty. It feels intentional, whether it actually is or not. That's where the mind begins filling in the blanks. Maybe they're losing interest. Maybe you were too much. Maybe they finally saw who you really are. None of those conclusions require evidence. Only uncertainty. Because uncertainty is uncomfortable. And the human brain often prefers a painful answer over no answer at all. That's why waiting can become emotionally exhausting. You're not just checking your phone. You're checking your worth. Quietly. Over and over again. One notification changes your mood. 1 hour without one changes your identity. That sounds dramatic. Until you've lived it. Then it feels painfully ordinary. Many people eventually notice something unsettling. They aren't thinking about the other person every minute. They're thinking about what the silence might mean about themselves. That's a completely different experience. The conversation stopped. But the internal conversation became louder. You replay every message, every joke, every emoji, every pause between replies. You begin editing memories that already happened, trying to locate the exact second everything supposedly went wrong. Most of the time, you never find it, because there wasn't one. Not every unanswered text has a hidden meaning. Sometimes people are overwhelmed. Sometimes they avoid difficult conversations. Sometimes they lose interest. Sometimes life genuinely interrupts them. But uncertainty rarely feels satisfying. So the brain searches for certainty. Even if the certainty hurts. This becomes especially intense for people who have learned that connection is unpredictable. If love once felt inconsistent, if attention had to be earned, if acceptance felt temporary, then silence can awaken old emotional alarms. Not because the phone is dangerous, because the feeling isn't new. The silence simply reminds the nervous system of something familiar. And familiar emotions often feel more believable than hopeful ones. That's why reassurance can feel addictive. One reply creates relief. Not because every problem disappeared, Eventually, connection starts feeling less like closeness and more like surveillance. The cruel irony is that many people waiting for one text aren't actually chasing a message anymore. They're chasing relief. Relief from overthinking. Relief from uncertainty. Relief from wondering whether they mattered at all. Because beneath the screen, beneath the notifications, beneath the typing bubbles and read receipts, lives one quiet human hope: to feel chosen without having to constantly question whether you still are. Perhaps that's the deepest wound silence can touch. Not the absence of words, but the fear that your presence was easier to leave behind than you ever imagined. And maybe that's why an unanswered text can feel so much bigger than a phone. It isn't only about communication. It's about what uncertainty awakens inside us. Sometimes the longest conversation isn't the one that never happened. It's the one that never stops happening in your own mind.